Hello, 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 and welcome to another episode of Persuading for Profits. This is the sales and marketing podcast that gives you the skills, the tools, the strategies you need to go out and crush it in your sales and marketing career. Thank you to radioupdate.com for hosting us, for their patronage. Andy Meadows runs the show over there. It's a great resource for all things radio industry. If you need help with programming, if you need help with sales and marketing, if you need help with engineering, John Reynolds hosts a video course over there, which is great for creating podcasts and doing some video production on the radio station. Wonderful resource. Go check it out, radioupdate.com. And I'm very happy today from the island of Gozo in the Republic of Malta to have Mr. Tommi Murshed-Parrish joining us. Tommi, how are you, sir?
I'm glad to be here, man. Thank you for having us. I appreciate it.
You're very welcome. Looking forward to this, man. So, Tommi, you have quite a varied background. The main thing I think that I know you for is that you are an expert on testimonials, and you have a business where you help people with testimonials. But as I kind of dove into your background and your bio, you have a lot of things that really I think would be valuable for salespeople to learn and know and talk about. But I know if I understand correctly, you're big with BNI, which is Business Networking International, things like that. But anyway, man, welcome to the show. How is life over in Gozo right now?
It's quite calm. We're getting a lot of tourists at the moment. I live in a tourism village, so they come by the busload. It's half term probably at the moment around the EU, so this is one of the places they come to. I take it for granted it's quite sunny here, but elsewhere it isn't. So it's busy, relatively. You know, this is still the calmer of the two islands. The other one is, you know, compared to our 35,000 people, that's like 500,000 on the bigger island, and it's probably one of the densest countries in the world when you actually stack up population and, you know, area size.
Man, that is so fascinating. It's not, now, I assume that your accent, though, it's not the Gozo accent, right? Where are you from originally, and how long have you been there?
I'm from Leeds, Yorkshire, originally, but I've been here for 5 years, and the longer you're here, the weirder your own accent gets. You know, they have their own dialect of English here.
I bet. Well, very cool. So tell me now, again, I know you from being the testimonials guy, and if anybody has seen my podcast before or anything like that, I talk about testimonials all the time. I just think it's almost like a cheat code. I mean, that for influence, they are so powerful when they're done right. And I think that they're also powerful because so few people do them. I mean, if you really want to separate, so much of business these days, especially in the world of digital marketing, where everybody can just, you know, have ads up all the time, it's really hard to separate yourself from your competition. So I want to ask you about testimonials, but before we get into that, maybe tell me about your background, how you started off, and how you got to this place that you are now with your company.
Yeah, sure. So I have Asperger's syndrome, and when I was a kid, I used to get the daylights beaten up, you know, or beaten out of us on a frequent basis.
Really?
You know, I couldn't read people at all because I couldn't tell if they were laughing at me or whether they were, you know, being offended by something that I said. So I spent probably to my early 20s in a decent amount of isolation, you know, just staring at the ceiling and not going out, not even putting the television on. And at some point somebody said, you know, it's a bit strange, and they said it out of good spirit, you know, that you're not looking me in the eye, and to people who didn't know you, it'd be off-putting. So I became obsessed with reading body language, voice tonality, you know, facial expressions. When I graduated from film school and would go to the Cannes Film Festival every year, I'd be out till 4 a.m, you know, socialising with people, trying to improve that particular side of what I was doing. And what I found was, you know, what I found was that people were willing to talk and hang around and not leave if they felt like the spotlight was on them. Not a harsh spotlight, but a soft spotlight where they could open up and tell their story. especially actors and filmmakers, they do like to talk, don't we all? But the more I did that, the more I was picking up this soft skill, which when I went into video as a commercial thing, for small businesses, was quite a handy skill to have. And I wasn't planning on any of it. That's just how the chips landed.
That is amazing. Well, you don't come across, I guess all the things you described would be kind of the antisocial. It comes across as antisocial, right? And not being able to make eye contact and things like that are things I guess you would associate with Asperger's. But you don't come across that way at all, at least right now, from however many thousand miles away. So is it something that you've specifically worked on that? And it sounds like it sounds like you had to work on reading people, but you also maybe had to work on presenting yourself. Is that a fair way to characterize it?
Yeah, it goes two ways. One, how you come across, and two, how you interpret what people are saying and how you read how they're looking at things. It was a survival skill. If I didn't pick it up within a decent amount of time, keeping it. Sorry, if I didn't, it's a survival skill. So excuse me, all over the place. It's a survival skill. So if I didn't pick it up in a fairly short amount of time, I would be at the fringes of society, which is,
right.
Sadly what happens to a lot of people. They don't get the support they need, and people are presently complaining that there's too much attention to people given on the spectrum, So I had to learn it, and then just by the fact I was ending up in the business world, it was handy to have. And yeah, I did obsessively practice it without knowing I was practicing it, if you know what I mean, because I was networking at the time, and that's all I thought I was doing.
How cool to now. So where did you go to film school?
Leeds, my home city. Not
Leeds,
far.
awesome. It just a thing that you always liked movies. You always, was it? Is it a passion? Was that a passion with you, or just something that you felt like, okay, I'm a visual person and like kind of a hands-on person, and this is something that I would want to do? What led you to film school?
Well, I'm a film fan who didn't want a proper job. I wanted to go and study and be Kubrick and Kurosawa and all that. So that's what I did. And when you graduate, you've got to go find work. And obviously that little protective bubble means that you don't realise how difficult that world's going to be. And to be honest, that world was, as much as there is a lot of people on the spectrum in that world, a lot of it requires social skills and drinking skills, which I definitely didn't have the latter because I don't drink,
Right.
But the social skills as well came with it. And I took forever to really get up on that side of things, at least in terms of climbing that ladder, if you know what I mean. I'm also not very quick in the traditional sense. So if anyone's been near a film set, it's like learn on the job fast and be competent and pick up things really quickly. I couldn't. So, that world was not off limits, but much, much more difficult to get into.
Right,
so
right.
I ended up in, doing something I love, but outside of the creative film world.
That is so cool. So, but honestly, I was actually a radio, TV, film major in college, and so I've always wanted to go to Cannes. That seems like such a cool place to hang out, and the Edinburgh Film Festival, all those festivals over there in Europe always seemed really cool to me. That's very fascinating, and so I segueing into testimonials, and this is kind of the way I describe testimonials to people, because here we definitely live in a review-oriented world today, right? With Google and Facebook and Trustpilot, there are so many places that you can leave online reviews, Amazon, and people are pretty good at reading them, and I think probably even becoming more savvy at decoding them and seeing which ones are more authentic than others. But so for testimonials, I kind of describe them as reviews kind of on steroids, right? And I always tell people that you correct me where I'm wrong here, that testimonials are kind of like films. You want them to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. I had this problem, then I encountered this guy, and now life is happily ever after. And that you kind of want them to mirror the people that you're like from people want to see themselves as much as possible in the people giving the testimonials. Is that, just to start off the discussion there, is that kind of an accurate way to describe testimonials, or where am I off base there?
I wouldn't say you're off base. There's a fair bit to unpack. So some people like the linear story, right? I was suffering, now I'm not suffering. Recommend this person, right?
Right.
And anything I've done, it's always by just tinkering around and figuring it out by instinct. So I never looked at testimonials. Oh, there's a business, let's get into it. I started doing it when people weren't really talking about them.
Right.
It wasn't even a buzzword, much of one at that point, or at least videos weren't. And so I think of them more as movie trailers. Like it. You watched a trailer before, right, where it pretty much tells you the whole movie from start to finish, and you go, right, well, I'm not going to watch that because I know what happens, right? A testimonial is not meant to tell, like, every detail of the whole story in a couple of minutes. It's not going to happen. They're meant to give a taste of what it was like to work with you and what outcomes you had and how you felt about those outcomes above anything else. So, sometimes, especially now, where people are doubting what they see sometimes or what they're reading, the human element rather than the constructed element is the thing they relate to more. They relate more to real feelings, quirky feelings, feelings that come from people expressing them as only your crazy grandpa would. I don't know, right? It's not the thing that you can just Xerox, because the more they look Xeroxed, the less people trust them. So many testimonials are templated, which was great once upon a time. And now people are looking for the human element in there. They're looking to see if that person can be trusted. But at the same time, they're looking for the thing that makes it jump out and feel real to them. Because, as I heard the other day, it was a really interesting point. People, as much as anything, buy feelings. I think you need some context with those feelings. So you can't just be all feeling no substance. People want to know what they get. But people do want to know how somebody feels about what they gotten.
That is very good to describe it like a well produced film trailer, right? And like you said, there's ones that give away the whole movie. And like, well, that was stupid, and it's almost satisfying. And it's like, okay, well, you understand that. And it's almost like when it closes the loop, you move on to the next thing and try to find a place that's going to give you an open loop to plug in. Is that kind of an accurate way to describe it?
A testimonial is meant to get you the conversation. A good video testimonial is meant to get you the conversation. It's not necessarily meant to close the sale. It's meant to put fuel in the trust tank to get people closer to the end. But you might have that meeting with somebody after they see the testimonial, and you still need to decide what options are right for them if you decide that they are right to work with you. So it's meant to get people in front of you, but not close the thing itself, if that makes any sense.
Okay, I completely lost you there. The last thing I heard, I'm so sorry, Tommy. The last thing I heard was the testimonial is supposed to, my internet clunked out. The testimonial is supposed to get you the conversation. So take it from there, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. Let me just find the point in my brain cloud again. Testimonials are meant to get the conversation. They're not meant to close the deal, because if you're closing every deal and you're working with everybody that comes in front of you, then your prices are probably too low and you're not turning down people that you should. They're meant to give you the best pool of clients possible to choose from at the prices that you want.
So do you create your testimonials, I guess, then to both attract people and weed people out? Is that fair to say?
If you interview somebody in a real way and you get them to openly talk and then pick the most relevant parts of that feedback, that process itself will attract the right people and weed out the wrong ones, because there will be a flavour from that person of what it was like to work with you, the relationship you had with that client. And some people won't like that kind of relationship. Some people will think that's not for them, but the right people will run right towards you, And some people who like what they saw will still have a meeting with you, but they might not be the right fit, and you might have to refer them somewhere else. But at the end of the day, often people feel like they're auditioning for potential clients, and it should be a balanced situation. You trust me, I'm right, and I can help, but are we a good fit? Can I solve the problems for you where you are right now? Those questions can't be answered at the end of a testimonial, all of them. They're meant to get the conversation so you can decide.
Oh, that's very good. So what are the biggest, and I think that people just think a testimonial is the same as an endorsement, and so what are the biggest mistakes that you see people make, or the biggest misunderstandings maybe that you see people make with testimonials?
Okay, so you could break that down into how people view them and how people do them. So in terms of how people do them, people think that one testimonial is the same as another testimonial if they're from the same person. So let me say that again. So people think that the number of testimonials you get is I'm struggling with the right words there, maybe because I'm a little bit dyslexic, but some people think that because you got 10 testimonials, those are worth the same as somebody else's 10 testimonials. And what matters is not the volume of testimonials, it matters is the standard of testimonials, the impact you made upon somebody and who that person was. And I don't necessarily mean by status or title, but where their business was at the time. You might have an accountant that had just themselves working in a small office that has come a long way and has had an easier time of it and has gotten better clients. But that's a different story if the accountant has 40 members of staff, because they're dealing with different problems. So whoever you're working with is going to attract similar kind of people. Not exactly all the time, but, they're going to attract certain people based upon the challenges that they were having, and if other people see the same in those challenges. If the other people see a similar kind of problem that they're facing that you've solved, and so they'll come and talk. In terms of how, I can just reel off some of the most common mistakes. Common mistake number one, above all others, is that people let it be done by automation. Right? There should always be somebody in front of your client, whether it's you or somebody who does it for you, interviewing that client, or at least being in front of that client as the audience. So they're talking to a real human being, because no matter how AI constructed somebody can make things, or whether it's to pressing a button on a screen and just, seeing themselves in the reflection of it and hitting record and going, it's quite nervous talking to a screen alone. You question what you're saying. You're not sure if it feels right. You're wondering, how would that person feel about it? Did I do it right? And actually, what's more natural is a conversation. You open up to people who are conversing with you. But, pressing a button, not really. That's the big one. The other big one is that people don't ask for them at the times they should do. There's no systems. It's all random. Oh yeah, we should do that. Right, let's ask for a testimonial. Opportunities go missing. The other one is not using the testimonials they have. They collect them, right? They put them in the vault like bonds. Never cash them in, And actually, one of my most frequent habits is having to get in touch with people and say, you got this testimonial, now use it. Make sure that it's in the places it should be. Website, email footer, social media. Make sure you show it on social every 3 months or so at least. These things often end up buried. And that's a big mistake as well. I'd say those are amongst the top three.
So all great stuff. I mean, so basically, with regard, I think that's all really good stuff. So let's unpack the first part there. Having somebody in front of the person to interview them, properly interview them. I mean, now, are you taking it from the approach of like, you're trying to get feeling as well as the story? Are you taking it from the approach of when you interview people, like you're a documentary filmmaker and you're kind of making a mini documentary about them? Is that kind of the same approach, or do you have something that you kind of want them to, or do you try to guide them in a direction, or is the only direction you're really trying to guide them is to get the fullest expression of their feeling for working with the person or whatever? Does that make sense?
That's a great question. Some of my interviews are fairly long, and I will consult with my clients about their client's journey before I have that meeting. But that won't be the full story. And there's a lot that, my clients, as your clients will say the same, that you do that they didn't realize that their clients liked. They didn't realize that people cared about that thing you were doing so much. And sometimes to get the full story out, to get all the details, you have to interview people for a while. You have to, get them to open up and unpack lots of things like we're doing now in this interview. You're going down branches and rabbit holes that keep kind of splintering off in all directions. And all that stuff is good, by the way, because even if you edit it down to a short video, there is still lots of different things in there that will make good social clips that highlight different areas where you've made a difference. And some people care about that one, and some people care about that one. So the story can actually go quite wide. So, yes, I often find out from my clients, is there anything that I should ask about? But I won't be trying to manipulate the person in the video into saying certain things, because there's a much more interesting story if you let people tell it.
Yes, that is, and I do find that in even this format. I mean, we do a longer format. We try to get as many reels and stuff as possible, and I try to ask questions that will generate good searchable reels on the internet, too. But usually there's a point here where it's like, 20 minutes in, you really start getting to the good stuff. You know what I'm saying? It takes a minute to get through everything, to really get everybody feeling comfortable and sorting and getting comfortable, I guess, with the interviewer, but also getting comfortable with just expressing themselves about the subject too. I feel is maybe part of the challenge there as well. How is it when you're talking with people? I mean, when you're talking to the interviewee, I mean, do companies pay them for their time? I mean, how do companies get people to agree to sit down for an interview?
So my clients don't pay their clients or give them an incentive, because that would compromise the truth of what they're saying, but the clients I work with have treated their clients so well and gotten such good results that client wants to help. Even if in many cases that is the sort of thing that people might feel a little vulnerable about, they feel so strongly, they feel such gratitude towards my client that they want to tell that story. And sometimes at the end of it, they feel quite good that they've reflected on how far they've come or how well things have turned out. It's a bit like Jimmy Stewart, we actually really have had a good life,
Right.
So,
right.
I'll give you an example, or a couple of examples. I've worked very often with a tax investigations specialist who helps people who've been under the eye of the government, which is not everybody's cup of tea talking about, but they respect her and they appreciate her well enough. I've done one for an insolvency practitioner in England, which probably, in America might be better understood as bankruptcies and liquidations and helping that sort of thing. And there was a company who liquidated itself and came back from the ashes to do better. And no matter how well it's doing, it says something if they're going to talk about that. I've done them for a funeral director.
Oh, wow.
And don't get me wrong, I do a lot of the stuff that's not so dramatic in the sense, like marketing companies, finance companies, things that people are a little bit easier talking about. But you can understand that a lot of it comes from how you feel about, a lot of it comes from how people feel about you, whether they give you a testimonial or not. And if you are feeling like you need to give an incentive for them to do it, that relationship has not been nurtured well enough, or maybe they just don't care enough about what you're doing for them.
Right. No, that's a great. So, and that's a great thing. A good review, a great testimonial, starts from the moment from your first interaction you have with that customer, right? I mean, you're always building that from that moment on.
I spoke to somebody once, and he was having a challenge getting testimonials. I often get asked to consult on how to get more of them. And I said, how often have you been in touch with your customers? Not very often, apart from the job. So they did the job, disappear. I mean, every business coach will probably talk about the how are you call. But my favourite trick trick is the wrong word. It's just a thing I do. As I've done it for my family members for years, is send postcards. I send them from Malta, the ones that you can only get from here. You know, when I go abroad, I send them. I send them on the app. And strangely enough, you'd be surprised how much a 6x4-inch piece of card with some words on it and a picture does for people's willingness to want to support your business. I don't just mean testimonials, I mean in all sorts of ways. But people don't nurture that. You know, one of my favourite books in business is one that not many people have heard of. The guy passed away last year. I think it was called Giftology by John Rowling. And it was all about the art of strategic gifting and how to create better relationships with your clients, which in itself leads to referrals, not just testimonials. Doors being opened. You know, a lot of people just don't do the basics. And he made a point. He says 10% of your income should be going on gifting. And I'm not saying that I can manage that, or I have managed that, you know, because it's a habit and he's probably been at the top end of it. But I can imagine what a difference it would make. You know, presently, I just make sure my clients feel cared for. And I would stress anybody does the same, and they will see more testimonials and more referrals and more doors being opened.
So a client gets a postcard from you. What does it say on the postcard? I assume it's just like a few quick lines. Is it a general message or?
Whatever I feel like writing at that moment in the bar. It's literally, it's a postcard from the country. It's got a Maltese stamp on it. And what I wrote with a pen, and usually a smudge, because I often end up, you know, rubbing it accidentally, and you know, but people know it's real.
That's so great, right? Well, I think Joe Girard, who is, he had a book on selling. I can't remember the name right now, but he goes down as like one of the greatest salesmen ever lived, especially in the car sales business. That was his thing. Every month, he would send somebody a card in the mail. And really, the general message on the card was, "I like you. You know, I like you. I like your business." You know, the Christmas, Easter months like that are easy, but he would just always find a way to send somebody. And I just think that's so overlooked these days. That's a great tip and a great technique there. And I was going to ask you about length because it's kind of funny. You say sometimes your conversation's going on for a while, and I find the same thing here. I mean, I limit to an hour, but like most people, I feel like I could talk for 2 hours. People are interesting. I'm blessed to have really good people on this podcast, so they're always great conversations. I remember I saw Ken Burns, who was the he made the Civil War documentary here. He made the most recent one was the country music documentary, which I think was one of the greatest things I've ever seen in my life. Baseball, he made the baseball documentary back in the day. And he said, after the Civil War documentary, somebody asked him, how long were you talking to Shelby Foote, or how long were you talking to whoever you talked to? And he said, I limited every interview, and I think it was like 20 or 30 minutes. It was like you thought he sat down and talked to people for hours. He's like, nope, I do what I try to do in that time, whatever it was for one reel, or maybe 2 reels. He was shooting on film back in the day. He said the only person that I went longer with was Ted Williams, who was the baseball star. I believe that's what he said. But I thought that was always fascinating and interesting to me. So I'm glad to hear that you don't really limit it to a certain amount of time, but that you let the conversation go and maybe get the really good stuff deeper into the conversation, it sounds like.
It's a really interesting question, because when it concerns how long you can interview somebody, I know that I'm going to edit that interview. Not everybody is confident that they can interview somebody for a decent length of time and find time to get that interview edited without handing it over to somebody. I also have a pretty good pulse on the willingness of that person to talk at length and when they're feeling a little bit itchy and when we need to move it on and wrap it up. Some of my clients, their clients have longer than others. Some people are, high flyers, high rollers, and are a little bit busier, and I'm kind of picking up how grateful they are to that client, how much they might have repeated what they said before in a previous question slightly. There's a very human intuition when it comes to knowing how long I can ask somebody about something, but also there are certain subjects that are more abstract than others. Anything in construction is pretty straightforward relatively. My boiler works or it doesn't. You know, my electric works or it doesn't. I'm not saying that trades businesses are all like that, because my family come from trades, and actually there is quite a lot of detail that goes into it. But when you start getting into things like coaching, people have a tendency to talk in the abstracts, and I have to do a lot of digging to find out what that really means, because a lot of people who've been coached and become coaches particularly have a tendency to talk in abstract terms rather than how they really feel deep down. So I've had to go under it a few times and ask, okay, well, thank you for telling me about that. What does it mean to get this? And then sometimes I'll even get another abstract answer. How do I keep going until I can get not the answer I'm looking for, but an answer that expresses something that people can understand? Because, you know, a lot of the time there's a lot of corporate jargon thrown about. So sometimes the interviews can go longer. Sometimes it's just a lot of detail. And people have got a lot of story. And they actually, believe it or not, do want to tell it all. And so I'll go as long as I need to. And I'll wrap it up when I feel like, you know, I've kind of got what I have been digging for. Let me rephrase that. I'll wrap it up when I feel like I've got as much as I can get without upsetting the person or my client as a result. You know, sometimes that's longer with some people than others. It's human intuition.
What a remarkable journey you've had to master that intuition, coming from the person who couldn't even make eye contact with people, right?
I think there are handicaps, and you just have to catch up with the rest of the world.
Right.
That's it, you know. So I don't tend to look back, because it's pretty uneasy to see how some people struggle, you know. The world is not particularly kind even now, after all the years, for people who are on the spectrum. You know, finally they start catching up, and people say they get too much attention, and they make excuses for themselves. And so, you know, it's something I try not to think about sometimes, you know.
Yeah, but still, I would say it's something to, even if you don't think about it, it's something to feel good about. I would just say that that's pretty remarkable, because a lot of people that don't even start off with that condition still can't master it, and still can't really figure out how to have a good conversation or read the room or anything like that. So let me ask you this though: are there like kind of go-to questions that, hey, I want to make there are 2 or 3 core questions that you're like, man, I want to make sure I ask these. They're just kind of favorite questions of yours. Do you have anything like that, or do you kind of just is it more freeform?
Mix of both. So when asking questions during a testimonial interview, I'll have some generic ones, which I tend to ask most people. I'll have a generic list for coaches as well, because I treat those slightly separate, because there are certain things I'll ask a coach, and there's certain things I'll ask a more regular service business. And there is a lot of just following the journey, following the rabbit hole, seeing where people go, and asking questions based upon their responses, rather than trying to drive it down a certain, you know, section of traffic. I mean, yeah, sometimes once they're finished talking, and this is the important thing, people need to feel like they can talk and tell their story. But once they've kind of, you know, gone down that angle, find the right path to go on again, and, you know, ask about certain specific things.
Yeah, I think people are so used, and this is what I've found. I mean, there was a time when man, excuse me, I'll have to edit that out. Where are we here? 34 minutes, okay. There was a time when I lived in Dallas, and I would drive Uber on the weekends, and I just kind of tried to do the same thing. You know, anybody that I was driving for any significant amount of time, I really just tried to play a game and see how much I could get them to talk. And I think so few people it's rare for people to really feel heard these days. And so even just the thing of listening and then asking follow-up questions based on what they just said is something that is so rare that allowing yourself to go down the rabbit hole with them is really something that people aren't used to. And they just, man, they will just open up and tell you stuff you didn't even think was possible, right?
It's a very shouty world. People love to natter and have their say. People want to feel important. And it reminds me of something from Bob Berg's book, The Go-Giver Sells More, which is just as good as The Go-Giver. And he made a point that a lot of people listen not to actually hear what the other person's saying and give a decent response to it, but wait for their turn to jump in. I was at a gathering of people a few days ago, and there was one guy, bless him, it was almost like as soon as a vacuum was there for somebody to put a few words in, he was in it every time and nobody could speak. And at some point I saw the guy putting a bag on his shoulder at the opposite side of the table, ready to leave and trying to leave. And still the guy managed to find a way of getting more words in. And, you know, kind of sucking the attention from that conversation all onto himself. And how well did people feel about that? Not great, you know?
Right,
and
right.
People do habitually people do habitually listen in order to take their turn to speak, not to keep the conversation flowing in a good way that everybody enjoys and everybody feels like they can be open.
Yeah, they always try to jump in and do whatever situation you had, they had one that was worse or better or more, whatever. It's the whole one-upmanship thing. And I made some notes as you were talking here, so let me try and catch up. Let me ask you this: how do you, when you're interviewing somebody, you're going to interview them for a testimonial? What is your approach to them? How do you prep them for the interview as far as just managing expectations of do you do anything to kind of get them in the right frame of mind and just give them expectations of how long it's going to take, or what is your approach to that?
That is a really good question, because people don't usually do anything, and when they do, they don't always do it well. So I tell people right off the bat, it's their show. We're not going to try to manipulate them. So put them at ease. Sometimes, for technical reasons, we have to do certain things setting up camera-wise, right? You know, So I might send them a device where they can use their phone. I have to check what sound equipment they're using, because I don't want to be fidgeting without too much on the day. And I've had encounters where people are very afraid of tech, or very uncomfortable with admitting that they're not very good at it, or or they're worried about looking like an idiot when they've usually been very confident. Hello, tradesman, right? So I am prepping it in advance with the least amount to do when we actually get on the call. The more you spend on the call trying to set things up, the more difficult it's going to get. So they've got to know where their link is to join the call. Sounds obvious, but reminders help. I'll tell them it's going to be a relaxed chat, not a harsh interview. And we're not trying to get them to say certain things to make my client happy. We're trying to put them at ease that they're in a safe space, because that's the really important thing. And I've started using that term quite a bit. I say this is a safe space, right? We're just having a chat. And when they hear that, they're a little bit more relaxed for what could be a vulnerable situation.
What, I guess, contract do you have with them? Kind of not written contract, but just, between two people of how do you enforce the safe space? I mean, I'm not going to, no gotcha questions. I'm not going to, embarrass you. Or is that kind of what you make them feel, or what is your approach to that?
It's all based on trust. If people feel like you're trying to manipulate them, forget trying to get anything useful. They'll pull the shutters down. So sometimes people will avoid answering a question, but they won't say, I'm not going to answer the question. Or they will be, without realizing it, trying to direct away from that question. Sometimes it's because it's vulnerable. Sometimes it's just because they don't like saying anything that isn't corporate jargon. And I've seen that before, right? So you just say, great, so what does this really mean? And then you realize that they're trying to throw corporate jargon at you constantly. And at some point, if you want to keep going and get your answer, you might get it, but they won't talk much for the rest of the interview. And, you'll probably have seen TV interviews like that, where at some point a person has pressed too hard for what they wanted, and that person has pulled the shutters down for the rest of it. So your actions will reflect the safe space you get during a testimonial interview. Press too hard, you won't get too much. Don't press at all. Press is the wrong word. Don't inquire at all, and you won't get anything. So you've got to read the room like you would do in any social situation.
Yeah. Do you do anything as far as, like NLP, for example, talks about mirroring, with voice and inflection and with, audio versus visual versus kinesthetic. Do you incorporate any of that in your questioning on a subconscious level to kind of make people feel at home and feel more safe?
So I have never been trained in NLP, but it's a subject I've heard about enough times. I know people of very good nature who are from an NLP background. There are people that use NLP in a really bad way, and actually one of my nightmares, and one of the things I constantly try to guard against, is the next Keith Raniere, or whatever his name is, the next Nexium character getting in front of me and me helping them succeed in business. Now, don't get me wrong, that's a bit far-fetched, right?
Right,
but
right.
There are people with NLP backgrounds who have used their skills to manipulate others in not a good way. So
right.
I think everybody probably does a little bit of NLP without realizing that they're doing it because they learned it on the street, right? As
right.
opposed to going to learning it on a course, right? So probably over time, I've noticed that if my body language is nothing like the person who I'm talking to, I'm super hyperactive and they're very relaxed, or let's say very sedate, I'm going to freak them out a little bit. They can't say why, but it might bother them. So I might reflect them a little bit. They lean back, we might lean back. There's, things that we do naturally. Monkey see, monkey do, right? But in terms of studying something to manipulate others or to get results from others, I don't go out my way to learn it because I think it's been used by some people in the wrong way. And I don't think that, let me rephrase that, I haven't learned it because I think it's better to do what I have learned on the street, which sounds really hardcore, but it's not, you know what I mean? I just mean in the everyday life, as opposed to learning how to do things to people they don't know are being done to them.
Right. No, that makes total sense. Yeah. So you had a quote earlier, which you heard from somebody else, which is that people buy feelings. So ultimately, if you have a goal in the interview, is it to try to get to the feeling level versus just the documentary level of, hey, this happened and this happened and this happened? Is that ultimately the goal? And is there anything special that you kind of do to get there other than just provide the safe space?
Trying to find the right words for this. Great question. You need it all. You need context. You need it all. You need what people got, how they felt about it, why they felt that way about it. So you need to keep digging. And you also need to know a little bit about the person's process in getting there, my client's process, the thing you did to get them to that point. You don't need a lot of it, but without it, it just looks like a bunch of happy feelings and results strung together, Right. So you need a little bit of it all, or, a little bit of process, plenty of results, plenty of feelings, and it all comes together and feels real.
That's very good. That is very good. Have you evolved on this? Is there a time where you started doing these things and then you had one interview where it just all kind of clicked for you? And what was that interview like, and what was what got you there?
It has evolved, but not like with eureka moments. It's more gradual learning how to ask questions and refining a process. So when I first started, I only asked maybe 5 questions, because the idea of a testimonial at the time was such a novel thing. And, you know, the results were pretty good. And to be honest, right, you can have a testimonial where you don't ask any questions, but you just say what you want to say, right? You can ask one with a few questions, or you can ask one with a lot of questions, right? And you will make the person who's receiving that testimonial look good. It's just that you can have so much more from the same client if they're, you know, as long as they're willing to give it. So a lot of people make the error of not finding out enough. Simply as. I'm sorry if I sometimes go off on a tangent. I might not have answered it in full there.
No, that's good. That's really good. No, that's really good. I mean, because it does evolve over time, and I think testimonials are still a novelty. I mean, there's so few people do them, and it's such a wonderful thing. Do you have a client who's? Do you have a story of a client or two that the testimonials? Who's your client who maybe the testimony? You don't have to give their name, but the testimonial had the biggest impact on their business. I mean, what is if people are looking, there's like, well, testimonials sound good and stuff, but I don't think I need them for my business. Give us some ideas of the impact testimonials can have on a business before and after, and do all businesses need them? Can all businesses use them?
Yeah, so I think most people have caught on to the idea that they need video testimonials. I think most of them have got there. The difference is how well they want it done. So some people do it the automated route, some people do it the DIY route, which is at least you're doing something, and some people do the professional route, or they do the more intensive route. And the thing that people often get wrong is, as I said earlier, they mistake like testimonials as all being equal. You can have an okay testimonial and you can have a much better testimonial, and the difference is how many of the right clients you convert, how much time you save yourself getting the right people over the line. Because a lot of people I've worked with, you know, and you asked me a story, so I'll give you an example. You know, there's a guy that made about 100 grand over 5 years in euros, right, which was great, and he made probably more money than that. It wasn't, you know, but what the difference was is the amount of energy. What the real story was how much less energy he needed to get those clients over the line, how fewer questions he needed, how easier it was for people to bring him the right clients, how he could be a little bit more pickier about who he was working with, even though he always was. Now he could do it with less trouble. You know, a lot of people want to raise prices. The clients who I tend to work with, you know, for the high ticket stuff, they're not going to be broke tomorrow if they don't hire me, but they want to protect their elite status. They want to be seen as the best, right? So They don't want to be getting good clients. They want the best clients because that gives them more purpose, more energy. Yes, more money, which is nice. Speeds up the process of getting them. Less stress wasted on that. And so, you know, depending on how good the footage is from your client and how well it's being arranged in the right order will dictate how many great conversions you get, how many conversions of the right people you get from those testimonials.
That's interesting. So is there and that's a great way to put it, of protecting what they already have. And it's the same thing. It's like, you know, you have the high dollar sports car. You're going to be more interested in maintenance, right? You're going to be more interested in tweaking it and making it better. Is there a specific place in the marketing process that it's best to drop testimonials in, or is it just anywhere's good? I mean, they're so powerful.
Where you can be seen. So where your name is, that's where your testimonials should be. The ones that people often miss are proposals, quotes, email footers.
Right.
Probably most of all in the hands of people who will refer them.
Oh,
you know?
Right.
The other ones are obvious. Websites, social media, this channel, that channel. But often it's the human element that makes a difference. People who really respect you, want to refer you, and that carries a lot of weight on its own. But when they have a testimonial on top of it, the conversion rate goes right up.
Right. That's incredible. You mentioned like in your email signatures, Do you have a place? Do you recommend people have a place on their website where they house their testimonials and they link to that, or to YouTube, or to Vimeo, or what is your recommendation there?
I know my sphere of influence. Sorry, I know my. I have a. I was trying to find the right words. Sorry. I only know what I know. So I'm more familiar with YouTube. There are channels where you can track who's been watching what on a website, but don't forget I give these to clients who aren't always tech savvy. Right. So YouTube is familiar and safe for them. Vimeo will often ask for a password if it's not been set right, and that really will throw people off, and they might not come back. Yeah. So YouTube is a little bit simpler for people to work with. And then I usually consult with them and go through all the ways they need to be using it, because it's not something that they often remember to do all of them. They need to be held to account. A lot of this work is as much as about holding people to account and making sure that they use it in all the places it can be used as it is creating the thing.
Absolutely, right? It makes you look bad if you create a wonderful testimonial and you get it to them and they never use it, and it doesn't help them or you. I mean, you have a vested interest, I think, in them at that point. It's kind of like you're the personal trainer, and you put them on a weight program, and they go out and eat terribly, and don't stay on the plan, right? You're not going to see the results if you don't use the plan the right way.
People want silver bullets, and if they want silver bullets, they can go to Van Helsing. People want to get the thing without doing any work.
Yeah,
I'm saving them a lot of work, but there's a little bit of work. And you'll always find somebody who wants something without anything being done. Yes. I'm not one of those people saying you've got to work your socks off to get this thing working for you, right? But you've got to do a little thing. And not everybody's prepared to do that. And often it's the people who want it for cheap. The bargain hunters, the slave drivers, the troublemakers, right? Who will not use the thing that you do for them.
Yeah.
So it often insulates you from those people if you get your good testimonials where people can see them, because then you pick better people.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so to wrap up here, thank you again for your time. I do appreciate you coming on here today. You've mentioned some business books. You mentioned Giftology. You mentioned The Go-Giver. I've heard about that one. The Go-Giver with Selling by Bob Berg.
The Go-Giver and The Go-Giver Sells More.
The Go-Giver Sells More. Awesome. Do you have any other recommendations, top business books that you would recommend to people?
Yeah, I recommend What's Your URP, not USP, What's Your URP by Andrew Gibson. That's a really nice and easy short read, telling effective but easy stories that get you the kind of clients you want. I also recommend one that's not as well known, there's one I recommend a lot called Human Connection by Cody Bateman, which, to be fair, talks a lot about his service, but his points about sending good cards with the right intentions to get good results from them, in terms of people opening doors, remaining friends, working with you, referring you, all that stuff, is spot on. It's really good advice. And, if people are looking to get smarter at that side of things, I would recommend that book a lot.
That is great. Yeah, that is. And sales, I think that could help a lot. Now then, kind of a fun question here at the end. You mentioned Kurosawa. You mentioned Kubrick. What are your top 5 favorite movies?
It's a difficult one, but you've thrown it on me, so probably I'd throw them off, but Mulholland Drive, in no particular order, by the way. Top movies: Mulholland Drive, The Good, Bad, the Ugly. I'm probably stuck at this point because you've, got me with a difficult question. High and Low by Kurosawa. And you know what? I don't know. Inception's up there.
Favorite Kubrick movie?
Do you know what? That one goes up and down. That one changes a lot, depending on which was the last one I watched.
Isn't it? Yeah, right.
It really does. I'm not. Do Do you know, it just, with Kubrick, it depends what mood I'm in. It really does.
Right.
You know, because if you try to measure these like, you know, those football stickers, you know, or those cards that rate things, then I think you're missing the point. You know, it's what flavour ice cream you want that day. Why is vanilla better than chocolate? You know, but I watched Full Metal Jacket quite a few times. I've seen them all a fair few times, to be honest. The only one I still haven't seen, strange enough, is Eyed Wide Shut. But all of them were brilliant. I think his early one, The Killing, is vastly underrated and is the one that most people haven't seen. Paths of Glory, hugely underrated. A lot of people haven't seen that. The Killing's good because it's essentially a film noir, a potboiler. You know, it's other people's equivalent of a cheap, you know, crime movie. But that is often where people show their best technique and storytelling. And I think that deserves a mention for that reason.
The Killing is one of my absolute favorite movies. And the tension in that leading up to the end is incredible. And it's got that woman in there that's the femme fatale is just one of the nastiest. I mean, the way she has that dude wrapped around her finger, man. It's a wonderful, great movie. And Doctor Strangelove, I do love that one as well. I find myself referencing that quite often in life. But
you mentioned BNI meetings. A lot of them that I get sent a picture of have the kind of circle lighting above it. And every time somebody sends me a picture, I just send a reply back saying, "No fighting in there. This is the war room."
that's that one, and you know, I don't think it's fair to scratch the whole program over just one incident, right?
Yeah.
I do love that movie. I think there's a lot of quotable stuff, and George C. Scott's great in it. Is Peter Sellers. I don't know if the movie stuff will make it on because I feel I'm rambling, but it's good to talk to somebody who likes movies. I appreciate you, man. I thank you. As you know, I am not afraid to admit I am kind of afraid of tech still, even in spite of all this. And there will be minimal editing in this, other than any glaring stuff that needs to be cut out. So I appreciate you taking your time. And people, how can people find you if they want to learn more about you and get some real testimonials done that jack up conversions for their business?
I'm on LinkedIn. My name's a Google whack. There isn't anybody with it elsewhere. And I've got no life, so I do reply within reasonable time.
Very cool. Awesome. Well, I do appreciate you coming on, Tommi. I hope things are well over there in Malta. And I look forward to doing this again. I think there's a lot more to talk about with you. I think you have a lot of great advice for sales and marketing people. And I wish you all the best, sir. Thank you for coming on. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you very much. You're
very welcome. That's it, guys. This has been another episode of Persuading for Profits. Appreciation to Tommi Murshed-Parrish for coming on here, and we will see you guys next time. Have a great week. Bye-bye.